In 1880 AD, the most powerful man on Earth wrote a private diary he never intended anyone to read. He wasn't writing about war, about empire, about politics. He was writing about his own mind. He described a restless voice that never stopped talking, thoughts arriving uninvited, pulling him away from the present moment. He called it the enemy within, and he spent decades trying to understand it. 17 centuries later, a team of neuroscientists put ordinary people inside an fMRI scanner and asked them to do nothing, just rest. The brain didn't go quiet. It activated, in a very specific pattern, a network dedicated entirely to one thing: wandering. They called it the default mode network, and it was, almost word for word, what Marcus Aurelius had described 18 centuries earlier.
How is that possible? To understand what Marcus Aurelius noticed, we need to understand who he was. He wasn't a philosopher writing in a library. He was an emperor, commander of the greatest military force in the ancient world, responsible for the lives of 60 million people, constantly at war, constantly being watched. And yet, every morning before the day began, he sat alone and wrote. Not for posterity, not for influence. He wrote to hold himself accountable, to examine the noise inside. Those writings survived. We call them the Meditations.
And they are unlike anything else from the ancient world. Buried in 12 books, scattered across 40 years of private entries, is one of the most precise descriptions of a mental phenomenon ever written before the age of brain imaging. Marcus noticed that his mind, left to itself, did not rest. It moved, it looped, it revisited conversations, anticipated threats, rehearsed arguments, replayed memories. He called this the wandering mind, and he was deeply suspicious of it. In Book 4, he wrote that people seek retreats, country houses, beaches, mountains. But the truest retreat, he argued, is inward. The problem is that the inward retreat is constantly interrupted by the mind's own restlessness. He wasn't describing anxiety. He wasn't describing depression.
He was describing something he believed was structural, built into the human mind, a default state, a baseline, the mind's natural condition when left without a task. He was right. He just didn't have the vocabulary or the instruments to prove it yet. The vocabulary would come 18 centuries later in a neuroscience lab in St. Louis, Missouri. But before we get there, we need to understand what the neuroscientists found and why it shocked them. Fast forward to 2001. Marcus Reichel, a neuroscientist at Washington University, publishes a paper that would become one of the most cited in the history of brain science. For decades, researchers had focused on what the brain does during tasks, reading, solving problems, remembering faces. But Reichel had been noticing something strange. There were regions that consistently deactivated when people focused and consistently activated when they had nothing to do. He called it the default mode network, a network of interconnected regions that become active precisely when the brain appears to be doing nothing. But here's what made it extraordinary. The default mode network doesn't rest at all. It is the most metabolically expensive system in the brain.
When it's active, which is whenever you're not doing a focused task, it consumes nearly 20% of the brain's total energy. What is it doing with all that energy? The research points to three things. First, self-referential thinking, the mind thinking about itself. Second, mental time travel, simulating futures, revisiting pasts. And third, social cognition, imagining what other people are thinking, feeling, intending. In other words, the wandering mind, the voice that never stops.
The loops and replays and rehearsals. Marcus Aurelius had been struggling with the default mode network his entire adult life and writing about it in extraordinary detail, 1,800 years before we had a name for it. The question is, was this a coincidence One brilliant man noticing something that happened to match modern science? Or was there a deeper pattern, a truth about the human mind so fundamental that anyone who paid close attention would find it? Because Marcus Aurelius wasn't alone.
500 years before him, on the other side of the world, a prince sat beneath a fig tree and made the same discovery. The Buddha's entire philosophical system, the foundation of what would become one of the world's largest religions, is built on one central observation: that the untrained human mind is restless, that it wanders, that it generates suffering not through external circumstances, but through its own incessant movement. In Pali, the ancient language of early Buddhist texts, there's a word for it: papancha. It means mental proliferation, the mind's tendency to expand a single perception into an avalanche of associations, judgments, narratives. The Buddha didn't have MRI scanners. He had something else: 45 years of systematic, rigorous introspection. And thousands of students who repeated the experiment and arrived at the same results. Now here's where the science does something remarkable. In 2010, Harvard psychologists Matthew Killingsworth and Daniel Gilbert published a study in Science magazine. They tracked 2,250 people throughout their daily lives using a smartphone app, asking them at random moments, "What are you doing? Where is your mind? And are you happy?" The results were startling. People's minds were wandering, not focused on what they were doing, 46.9% of the time, nearly half their waking hours. And the unhappiest moments were not the hardest tasks.
They were the moments when the mind had wandered, regardless of where it went. The paper's title was 4 words: "A wandering mind is an unhappy mind." Marcus Aurelius had written that exact insight, in private, in the 2nd century AD. And the Buddha had built an entire philosophical tradition around it 5 centuries before that. 3 independent sources, 3 different cultures, 3 different millennia. The same observation, word for word, across 2,500 years of human history. At some point, this stops being coincidence and starts being a discovery about the nature of the human mind itself. But here is where the story takes an unexpected turn.
Because the neuroscientists initially got the interpretation wrong. For the first decade after Reichel's discovery, the default mode network was treated as a problem, the task negative network, the thing that turned on when you stopped being productive. The cultural interpretation was obvious. The wandering mind was the enemy. Quiet it, train it, suppress it. Then the research got more complicated. The default mode network wasn't just generating noise.
Its self-referential thinking was essential for identity, for knowing who you are. Its mental time travel was essential for planning, for empathy, for creativity. Some of the most significant human insights, mathematical breakthroughs, artistic visions, occurred when the default mode network was active. The wandering mind was not the opposite of intelligence, it was part of it. And this is where the Stoics had seen further than the neuroscientists initially did. Marcus Aurelius never tried to silence the wandering mind. He tried to observe it without being controlled by it. He tried to return again and again to the present moment, without judgment and without frustration. That is almost word for word what modern mindfulness research now prescribes as the most effective way to work with the default mode network. A 2011 study at Harvard Medical School showed that 8 weeks of mindfulness practice physically changed the structure of the default mode network, thickening the prefrontal cortex, reducing gray matter in the amygdala. The Stoics had been prescribing a practice that physically rewires the brain, without knowing what the brain was, without scanners.
Without peer review, they had arrived to the answer through observation alone. So let's take the long view. For most of human history, the experience of a restless, wandering mind was treated as a spiritual problem, something to be overcome through philosophy, meditation, discipline. Modern neuroscience has confirmed it is in fact a structural feature of the human brain, not a flaw, a feature. But the ancients went one step further. They asked the question neuroscience is only now beginning to catch up with. What do we do with it? Marcus Aurelius spent 40 years returning to the present moment, not once, thousands of times, across a life of extraordinary pressure. He didn't need an fMRI scanner.
He needed to pay attention. Which makes me wonder, what else are we still discovering that the ancients already knew? That's the question To Longview is here to explore, every week, one thread at a time.